I've seen this guy speak a few times, and you know, I often wonder about his lifestyle. He's flying around the world, meeting with clients. He's got this great house of brands, and he makes these epic presentations. I don't know if he invented this stat, but the phones versus toothbrushes thing, I think everybody in here has seen that slide and love it. So I just wanted to ask, tell us about your regular day job. What do you really do between all this other stuff? I'd love to hear it myself.
I don't have a day job. So, hey everybody, I'm Bonin Bough, Vice President of Global Media and Consumer Engagement for Mondelez International. Most of you guys know me and know Mondelez. We were created when we spun off Kraft Foods in October of last year. We have some of the world's most beloved brands, whether it's Toblerone, Cadbury Dairy Milk, Oreos, Wheat Thins, Triscuits, Trident, Stride. I'm looking around making sure there's no brand managers who have brands that I forget. Nilla, so on and so forth, you name it. So my role is to basically run our global media investments across TV, print, and digital globally. But what I think is the most interesting thing is when I was first offered the job, they said, you know, Bonin, we believe that the future of all media is digital, and we want a digital guy to help chart the future of media. And so I thought that that was super, super profound. And so that's why I took the job. The majority of my role is working with our regional and market level media leaders to help rethink our investment strategy. You still have to appreciate the overwhelming majority of our money is spent in television. So it's thinking about how do we make TV work harder, but at the same time, how do we change the mix? So one of the big things I did when I came in was we rolled out connections planning. So the idea was, how do we start to look at the holistic consumer journey? So usually the way media is planned is it's like, okay, here's how much we're going to spend on TV, and then figure out all the rest of this other stuff, and it should be matching luggage. It'll just follow whatever we do on television. So we stepped back and said, well, what we really want to do is we want to understand what's the consumer journey between awareness all the way through to purchase. And then how do we map the different touch points? So as media types proliferate, it becomes impossible to do quote unquote 360 campaigns. So what we said was, what are the 36? What is the small amount of touch points necessary for us to reach a consumer to drive them to some type of action? So we launched connections planning, and connections planning says, okay, here are the 8 touch points, here's how they connect together, TV drives search, mobile drives TV, so on and so forth. And so we rolled out connections planning on a global level, and that's what we do. We work with all the brands in the markets to build what their connections map is, that then translates into a media investment strategy.
Great. Oh,
does that make sense?
That absolutely makes sense.
That's what I do during my day.
For better or for worse, that's a great segue into what we're going to talk about today. So, you know, what we're going to touch on here is really that theme. So you've got this great house of brands. How do you really create, define, understand, reach, and then measure and learn about your audience? So really, look, we've got a few slides here, but we're just going to have a conversation because obviously you have some great experience in doing this. When you think about this construct of, look, how do we go ahead and how do we really intelligently define an audience, especially in this world with all these multiple touch points? So one of the things we were talking about is, hey, you can start with location. That's a great way to do this, right? The idea of saying, start with the physical world. We're going to have to stand up to make this work, I think. Okay. But, so let's start with the physical world. And let's start to think about, one of the things you always talk about is point of impulse, right? That's really important to you and your brand. So no great surprise, we can start to understand where these locations are. But now we can start to say, well, where do the consumers live around these locations? Got to understand that connection point. And now I can layer on, where does our audience go? No great surprise for you guys, we can understand where these consumers go. And now we can even start to layer on things like this, saying, hey, if we know where our consumers go, we can see actually where they're activated. So one of the things we did with Mondelez recently was this construct of connecting mobile to digital out of home. So showing video creative on mobile devices based on time and location, and actually showing the same complementary video creative on screens as well, which I think was a really interesting thing. I know you start to think about this, so let's talk about one of the things I know is important to you is not just understanding time and location, point of impulse, but understanding the actual content that consumers are engaging with. Tell us a bit about your philosophy there.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we know that if I can target you in a relevant area and if I can make that content relevant to you, and then if I can have some historical understanding of what you thought was relevant content or the type of content you create, then I'm going to have a greater propensity to drive you to some type of action. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that, but that's where I think the future, so everybody's out there talking about programmatic media buying, which is important, and we're all going to be buying media programmatically. Hands down, that's not a question. But in a world where you can buy algorithmically, should you be delivering the same type of creative? So I think the challenge that most marketers, so programmatic buying is a data problem, right? On the flip side, you have this huge creative opportunity. I think what the challenge we will have, the next wave, will be that most marketers haven't approached creating content in real time that can map to a programmatic buying strategy. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how do you use data to drive creativity, and then how do you build the muscle memory necessary inside of organizations to not only buy programmatically, but deliver messages that are real-time tailored creativity. And that's what I think is interesting, is that when people look at the stuff that we did with Oreo, they talk about it in isolation, but it's part of a bigger organizational strategy. So for Oreo, that was on the back of us launching a platform called the Engagement Lab. And the whole idea of the Engagement Lab was to pull as many streams of social data into one place that we could, and as a result of that social data, create real-time engagement strategies, and more importantly, build the internal muscle memory necessary to operate in a real-time world. So the best is, people look at what we did with Daily Twist, and then for some reason, when they come and they talk to me about Super Bowl, they think about it in total isolation. They're like, how were you guys ready to do what you guys did in the Super Bowl? I was like, well, didn't you watch? We spent 100 days building a piece of real-time creative every single day so we could get the legal process right, so we could get the relations between working with creative teams, so that we could get comfortable in responding that fast. And then what we've done is we've rolled that out beyond Oreo, so we're going to talk about some stuff we're doing on Nilla, and I'm going to show not relevance scores, but I'm going to talk about real sales data that shows true lift from real-time engagement. And then we rolled it out on Trident, we rolled it out on Wheat Thins, and then globally. So I'll be spending the next 3 months in China as we systematically begin to kind of deliver on real-time creative driven by data. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That prompts an interesting question. You know, last time you were here, or one of your recent talks, you talked about the idea of the Oreo moment, right? And I think you said, somebody came up to you and said, how much more product did you sell? And you said, you're missing the point. I'd love to hear, so this was the idea that's saying, look, this is about marketing and engagement and brand. This isn't about trying to sell more stuff. What's the latest philosophy on that? Now some time has passed.
Well, it's about lift. I mean, so everything is about sales, right? Or else I'd be fired. And I've been close. But at the end of the day, I think it depends on how you measure it. So I'm a measurement guy, born and raised. It's interesting because I was a digital guy, right? And I remember it took so long to get, we were always at like the kids table, never at the big boy media table, because you can't measure it. You can't measure it. It's not measured enough. And so I feel like I spent a decade learning how to measure like every single number possible, like I know. And then I go over and it's now traditional media, and I look behind the curtain, and there's like no measurement whatsoever. You're like, what? This is crazy. So I'm just supposed to assume that this huge chunk of spend delivered here because there's nothing else happening. So that's my assumption, but there's no real data. So the data that's available on traditional is actually pretty weak in comparison to what I came from the digital side. But where we are now is it's not about, again, so when we do connections mapping, it's about looking at the correlation. So what's driving what? So really looking at attribution modeling of multiple touch points. So the one thing I can tell you is when we do social at the same time as television, we see twice the effectiveness of the TV spot. So if you think about, on average, a CPG spends 90% of their money on TV. Imagine if you could make that TV work twice as hard. So those are the big unlock opportunities. So it's all tied to sales, but it depends on how you get there. So do you want to attribute towards making your large investment work greater, or do you want me to tell you exactly what that specific tweet did directly to a sales number? Depends on where you come from.
And that's a great example, right? Oreo tied to TV is just such a great example of that. So look, so we're talking about social media, right? This idea, we can understand your audience, where they go, what they do. Now we can understand that content they engage with. I know you did some interesting stuff through this platform as well.
We did. We launched the first 6-second Vine spot, although Dunkin' Donuts tried to say that they did. Is Dunkin' Donuts in the room anywhere here? I'm just kidding. Ours was truly first, though. Anyway.
No, absolutely. So And
I
I
got
think,
the time
yeah,
stamp
no,
to
you,
prove
you,
it.
you had some great examples of that. We can't go into it now, but so one of the things I wanted to do was talk about Nilla, right? Which I think is, if we move to this next step and say, well, what about reaching, understanding these audiences, thinking about Nilla here as, I wanted to put a couple of these slides up and have you talk about your experience thinking around Nilla as a brand and how mobile can help you understand these consumers.
So I love this case, and I actually don't think that we've talked about the case enough, to be honest with you, because I think what it does is it really underscores the power that's in front of us. And so here's Nilla. We call it an entrepreneurial brand, which basically means you don't have any money, good luck, be entrepreneurial, right? Be entrepreneurial. So we started here. So first I have to give credit, and Darlene is not able to be here with us today, but she was the brand manager on this. And her bravery and courage, and I think at the end of the day, it all comes down to people and talent, and so she's a huge talent. She really drove this. But she worked with VaynerMedia, who actually did the 6-second science with GE as well. So we sat down. At that time, Nilla had 15,000 Facebook fans. The goal was to just use Facebook to see if we could lift the brand. So first, and this is where I think we're in a different place now in social. So what we started, we said, okay, let's work with our strategy and insights folks, and let's build demographic and psychographic models that we could actually buy against in Facebook. So very targeted towards people who were going to be Nilla purchasers or have the chance to be Nilla purchasers. So we very systematically used analytics to build a community of potential purchasers. And I think sometimes we get lost in big community numbers versus thinking about who were the actual buyers, the potential buyers. Now we have about 330,000 Facebook fans, right? At the same time, we wanted to be very systematic about creative. So we launched 4 or 5, and if you go on to the Nilla Facebook page, you can scroll from the beginning and see where we started 6 months later. I'll talk about these, hang on one second. And so you can see where we started from and see all the different creative campaigns. And this is what I think is interesting, is now we have an opportunity. We don't have to sit back in the room and say, we think this creative is going to be the best. Choose that one. The world will love our brand with this piece of creative that we from a top are able to select. Instead, we said, well, let's go out and actually test the community and see which one works. So let's look at the numbers. What gets the most shares? What gets the most likes? Let's actually figure it out. And so we built out various campaigns, and the one that has been growing the fastest is called Momisms. But what's interesting is that Momisms actually started as just a blank yellow platform with just text on it. I think the first one was, good families are like fudge, filled with a lot of nuts but sweet, or something like that, right? And then they started evolving it, so they put the woman's face on it, and then text, so good moms let you lick the beaters, great moms turn them off. The anniversary of the cookie, oh look, it's my 18th annual 21st birthday, instead of saying exactly how old it is. If you want breakfast in bed, sleep in the kitchen. And I child-proof the house, but somehow they keep getting in. When the royal birthday happened, they said, your son's a royal, mine's a royal pain. We were lucky, Jay-Z fills his villa with Nilla. And so they launched one, thank you, Jay-Z, for filling your villa with Nilla. But you can tell a deep insight into the core purchaser, into her attitude, her sassiness. We began to learn as we went forward what actually works, and now there's hundreds of these out there. So I was walking by Darlene's desk, and I'll come back to this, but there was this box of Nilla on it that had a Pinterest logo. Pinterest recipe on the front of the box. And I stopped, I couldn't believe it. I picked up this box, I was like, oh my God, I've never seen us put a Pinterest recipe, a user recipe on the front of packaging. Then I looked on the side and there were these little logos for each of the community, inviting people in to become a part of Nilla. It was like social packaging. I've never seen this. I said, wow, how did this happen? And Darlene smiled. The packaging will be rolling out soon. Darlene smiled, she said, but that's not the most important thing. Let me show you something else. So she started walking me through the numbers of the business. So 6 months year to date, the brand is up 9.8%. Again, let me step back. It's rare in the CPG space that you have a case where nothing else was happening. Nothing else, in total isolation. This is all Facebook lift. In June, and it's a really sizable brand, as well, so that's a pretty big lift for just Facebook with a very small spend, by the way, if I can underscore that. 6 months where they were investing, the largest Facebook spend, the brand is up 12%. So I think it just speaks to using analytics on both sides. I'll give you some other numbers. We get some of these posts will get 30,000 likes, right? If you look at the Super Bowl post on Facebook, I believe it's 25,000 likes. Now let me tell you the difference. You have a 34 million base on Oreo. You've got a 330,000 base on Nilla, and you're still getting 30,000, 4,000 shares. So it just proves that we used analytics to find the right community, people who actually are purchasers, people who actually believe in the brand, and hence we're driving real sales off the back of Facebook, and at the same time using analytics to drive our creative expression, how we're looking at delivering creative and messaging.
Great. Now that makes sense. There's some compelling studies. I love Nilla as a brand. So when we were talking about this, right, you think about the consumer journey here, right? You think about this construct of you're understanding the consumer, and for you, to some degree, right, the consumer journey ends in this point of impulse. And we talked a lot about understanding the consumer up the funnel, but I just thought it would be useful to say, well, how does this really look? If you think about this awareness, consideration, and then ultimately this point of impulse, so you've talked a lot about understanding the awareness side here, right? So some of these campaigns around understanding awareness, so we think about this funnel, this is how we start to reach these consumers. But then you go down further, and we've even talked about digital out of home, so now bringing in other mediums. And now we're talking about, well, imagine I can think of consideration. I think some of the things you're starting to do is now we can see consumers who have either been into our point of impulse before or they've actually purchased these products. Well, they're probably in consideration mode. And then, of course, when you get right down to the bottom here, now we're thinking about in-store impulse. And I know you've talked a lot about impulse. What does that mean to you, right? What's key? What's important about that? How do you think about this point of impulse and how to affect it?
Yeah, well, we know the only device that you have with you when you're closest to the point of buying of our products is that mobile device. At the end of the day, you walk by convenience, you have the mobile device. You walk in aisle, you have the mobile device. And so all the numbers that we've tested show either A, if I target you in and around the store, I can drive 10% lift in-store purchases at convenience. Again, pretty huge. If I target you in-store, I can see 22 to 32% lifts of same-store sales. And the beauty of that is we looked, is it a deal base or is it equity? And both of them actually drive just as hard. So just an equity message. But I think what people fail to realize when you think about my category specifically, 2/3 of the purchases, food purchases, are unplanned. So you go to the grocery store and you walk by, oh, there's a lovely package of Oreos, and that's an impulse purchase. So if I can trigger that same impulse awareness with this mobile device in store, then I'm playing with a huge space or a huge market opportunity for me to move product. So what really matters to me is being able to target you when you're close to store or in store, or quite frankly during the times that I know you're more likely to purchase our product. In the morning when you're commuting, at lunchtime, on the way home, and then also we love being able to target you during primetime TV viewing to really create those co-viewing opportunities for us.
Yeah, no, I think that's why, you've talked about the consumer journey. That's why, to me, this consumer journey ends in this in-store impulse moment, but it's all building towards that, really. That's the key. So if you take that construct, there's a lot you can talk about when it comes to measuring audiences. I know, you guys are really data-driven. One of the things that we recently did with you is this construct of saying, well, if you think about the consumer journey and you think about people's mindsets and you think about point of impulse, understanding where they were before they came to that point of impulse will probably uncover a tremendous amount about their mindset. And also, if you can understand where they were beforehand, not only do you understand their mindset, their mode, you understand what they were doing. Were they at work? Were they at home? Were they coming out of a bar? What kind of work? What kind of home, etc. And that really sort of unlocks this consumer journey. So one of the things we collaborated together on was this idea of pre-visit. Where were people before they came? And I just thought it would be interesting to talk around some of the examples here that we found. So if you say, look, let's look at, for example, just looking in the category of retail for the purpose of this example, this is clearly an index, but imagine shoppers, consumers who visited a Safeway. Where were they before they went to that Safeway? So you can see here, interesting enough, Fred Meyer scores really high, right? So there's probably some comparison shopping going on there, and we're looking at all these other elements, and we're saying, well, how does that compare to a Costco? Because guess what? When people are shopping at a Costco, they're in a very different mindset, right? Because they're now big box shopping. And you can see here, again, an index, IKEA scores really high. And so, the interesting thing here is just backing it up and understanding these consumer insights is we can understand mindset, we can understand impulse. How do you think with all this new data now, understanding this consumer journey and unlocking all these insights, how do you think this can be leveraged by your house of brands to better understand, hey, how can we drive them to this point of impulse more intelligently?
Yeah, I mean, so that's what we talked about this a little bit. So that's my biggest fear. What's keeping me up at night now is that we're not smart data players. So as I look out, easily media becomes like the stock exchange. So great story. My best friend worked on the floor of the stock exchange right out of college, selling and trading paper-based, and now he lives in LA because pretty much there's no paper-based trading on the floor of the stock exchange anymore, and it's all algorithmic and programmatic. So we know that media will look like that pretty soon. I would argue probably in other countries even faster, and we can come back to that. So we know the world will look like that really soon. The question becomes is, for organizations, how do we become smart data owners so that when we go to the marketplace, because right now the people who own our data are our media agencies, which are amazing, great friends, but what happens if that friendship has to dissolve for some strange reason? And those are the folks that actually understand the data. So we don't own any of it. So when I go into the marketplace, I just look like a dumb buyer. I'm like, please just sell me something. Don't rip me off, please, I promise. Yes, he might be a user, I don't know. So the goal is how do we begin to build smart data practices inside of the organization, because then that unlocks all the type of opportunities to use data like this to actually then drive our buying and drive how we think about our buying. So hugely important, but I think it's a big journey that organizations have to begin, which is kind of where we're on that journey now.
So we were sort of talking about this topic, and I think the thing that gets us up every morning is thinking about this industry and thinking about mobile. Look, not only can it allow you to clearly uncover, define, reach audiences, it can allow you to learn about those audiences. Perhaps more importantly, we're obviously big believers, and I'm sure a lot of you are too, that mobile can provide this connective tissue to say, not only can we just understand this consumer journey now, because guess what? You've always got your mobile device with you, and it's throwing off data left and right, but now it can be a way to actually bridge these new mediums in. TV, getting connected. Digital out of home, getting connected. Cookies, getting connected. Out of home. All these elements are getting connected, so I think about the future whereby now you can start to define a creative strategy that not only is key to an audience that you really understand, that's not based on a focus group, but based on real data, but now you can connect to them with a creative strategy across all these mediums.
Yeah, and I think, let's be clear, the big challenge here is that organizational talent hasn't progressed at the pace necessary to keep up with change. At the end of the day, when they asked people to raise their hand, there was like 4 clients in the room. That's a challenge, right? Actually, I became a client because I thought clients were too stupid to buy good work, so I wanted to go to the other side to show them how to buy good work. Anyway, but the fact that there's not a lot of clients in this room is, to me, a big challenge. But even more than that is that we still have big gaps in knowledge sitting inside of organizations with the folks that are actually making decisions. So it's rare, like I'm one of the few digital guys, traditional media, but mostly it's not, and so in reality it's not. And there's a big divide between where they believe the world is going or what they're trying to hold on to and where the world's actually going. I give an example. I can walk into rooms and every single time I show a digital ROI, it will be dramatically higher than television. There is no time ever in my career to date that I have seen the digital ROI not beat television. Every single organization will tell you we're a numbers company. We like to do things by the numbers. But when actually presented with numbers of how consumers are actually either A, distracted from television viewing, or B, the potential to increase effectiveness of TV when you do things that are directly tied to second screen viewing, or higher digital ROIs, or better video ROI, they still don't make any changes. So the question becomes is what's really going on there? And I believe it's just an emotional thing. So we have to emotionally rehabilitate big organizations, and then we have to re-skill them. So, at the end of the day, the stat that I like is 1% of the descriptions of courses in the top 100 business schools say anything about digital. So you're graduating MBAs that are already failed from the beginning in terms of thinking different around these new channels. And then they walk into big established organizations that are consistently rewarding them for protection, for not actually changing or not actually doing anything different. So you have this dichotomy. And so at the end of the day, even when faced with the numbers, they still don't make moves. 25% of all media is consumed on a mobile device, but less than 1% of media spending is done on mobile. That's insanity. It's an entire, media ecosystem that hasn't really, inside the client, by the way, that hasn't really progressed to where the actual marketplace is. So this is great, but you have entire insights teams that need to be retrained to think this way, or else you're still going to have focus groups and,
Yeah, no, so I hear, right? And I think that's one of the big challenges. So look, so we want to get onto Q&A here, sure. But I think as a final closing question to you, I think this, for me, it's, so I hear, right? There's momentum, there's a business process change, there's so much cement we got to break through to get to the other side.
But it's talent, it's individuals, it's people.
So imagine, so instead of asking, hey, what do you think's coming? Imagine I could deliver you on a silver plate. You can have whatever you want the next year. You've got the talent, you've not got the barriers, you can define a strategy and you go execute on it. What would you do? What would be your wish for the next year? If you could really have all this happen, connecting this, having data, having access to all these, what would you do with it? What could happen? Where would this all go if you didn't have the momentum to fight against?
I want to be Adam Bain at Twitter, who's about to cash out on the IPO. Does that count? No. Oh, sorry.
That's a valid answer.
On that note, let's actually open it up to question and answers, though, because we got to get it moving for the next one. You're rocking and rolling. But let's open it up to question and answer from the audience. So, any questions so far? Crickets. Oh, you got questions over here. We're going to do this Phil Donahue style, so I'm going to hustle my way over.
I have no idea.
What's your name, sir? Trevor Hamilton. Okay, let's go ahead. Ask your question.
All right. Good stuff, Bonin, as always. Thanks. So great stats with the Nilla case study with 9 and 12% lift respectively with shares and likes on Facebook. Just curious to know, with rich media advertising, lots of great innovation going on, particularly with smartphone and tablet. Where does engagement and dwell time factor into importance as far as being able to demonstrate lift with brand?
Yeah, I think engagement time, especially on those mobile devices, dwell time is huge. We have a mobile app, which is up for an award this week. Hopefully it will win. Twist, Lick, and Dunk. And it is a simple concept. Cookies fly up, you swipe, twist, you lick, you dunk, right? Cash positive endeavor that we win on. We have about 4 million downloads, 200,000 daily active uniques who are active for 12 minutes. And I believe that has huge impact. So I guess I'm trying to just figure out the best kind of response to that, which is, yes, I believe in dwell time, but I also think that it also depends on when in that consumer journey that dwell time is happening. I care about the reason why I love mobile so much is because I care about getting close to point of buying. Dude, I want to hit you, bam, you go, oh, that's right, I should buy gum. Bam, convenience store's right here, I'm going to buy gum, boom, I'm done. So, or if I can have that dwell time during commute, then I know that you're more likely to think about buying. I'm seeing some signals in terms of we're going late.
Yeah, so no, you're not late, you're right on time, but thank you for that great answer to his question. But we got to keep it moving. So thank you for your time. Hey, no.